Have you ever noticed people who barely speak but seem to be living inside their own minds? People who sit quietly in a room, nodding, smiling, and listening, yet you can tell something is going on behind their eyes. They don't talk much, but their thoughts never stop. Every word they do speak feels carefully chosen. Every silence feels full. If you've ever wondered what is happening inside the mind of someone who speaks less but thinks too much, you're about to find out.
These people are not quiet because they have nothing to say. They are quiet because their minds are full. Conversations replay endlessly, every detail gets noticed, and possibilities are considered before a single word leaves their mouth. Others might see shyness, aloofness, or boredom. The truth is, their silence comes from thinking too much in a world that never stops talking. For someone who thinks deeply, every interaction carries weight. A simple "how are you" might trigger a 5-minute internal debate about whether to give the honest answer or the safe one. They consider tone, context, timing, and the other person's mood before even opening their mouth. This careful filtering is not overthinking in the way people often mock it. It is a form of emotional intelligence that tries to prevent misunderstanding, hurt feelings, or saying something they might regret. But because they take longer to respond or sometimes say nothing at all, others interpret that delay as coldness or disengagement. The truth is, they are more engaged than most. They are just engaged inwardly as well as outwardly, and that internal world moves at its own pace. One of the heaviest burdens these quiet thinkers carry is the belief that their thoughts are too much for others. They have learned, often through painful experience, that sharing their depth can overwhelm people who are used to surface-level exchanges. They have poured their heart out only to be met with blank stares, quick changes of subject, or awkward silences that made them feel like they did something wrong. So over time, they stop sharing. Not because they no longer care, but because they care too much about not burdening others. This creates a cycle of isolation that feels impossible to break. On the outside, they seem composed. On the inside, they are aching for someone who will meet them where they are, in the quiet, without rushing them to perform. It is important to understand that thinking deeply is not the same as being negative or pessimistic. Many assume that overthinkers are always stuck in worst-case scenarios. While that can happen, it is only one part of a much larger picture. Deep thinkers also imagine beauty, possibility, connection, and meaning in ways that others might overlook. They notice how sunlight filters through leaves differently in autumn. They feel the emotional weight behind a song lyric that others hear as background noise. They remember how someone looked when they said something offhand weeks ago because it seemed out of character. Their minds are constantly connecting dots, seeking patterns, and trying to understand the why behind everything. This is not a flaw, it is a different way of being human. Yet, society often rewards the fast talkers, the quick responders, and the ones who fill silence with noise. In classrooms and workplaces, participation is confused with intelligence. In social gatherings, the loudest voice gets the most attention. Quiet people are told to speak up or come out of their shell, as if their natural rhythm is a problem to be fixed. No one ever asks if maybe the shell is not a cage, but a sanctuary. For deep thinkers, silence is where they recharge, reflect, and make sense of the chaos. Being pressured to perform extroversion drains them, not because they dislike people, but because constant external stimulation leaves no room for the internal processing they need to feel grounded. This pressure creates a kind of loneliness that is hard to explain. They may be surrounded by friends, family, or colleagues, yet still feel utterly alone. Not because no one is there, but because no one sees the version of them that lives in their thoughts. They yearn to be known not just for their words, but for their depth, for the questions they wrestle with, the empathy they feel, and the insights they hold back because they fear being too intense. When someone finally does lean in and ask, "What are you really thinking about?" it can feel like coming up for air after holding their breath for a long time. But those moments are rare, so they learn to keep their inner world to themselves, even when it hurts. One of the most misunderstood aspects of deep thinkers is their need for time. They do not make quick decisions because they weigh every option carefully. They do not give instant answers because they want to be sure their response is honest and meaningful. This can frustrate people who operate on a faster emotional or mental timeline. But for the quiet thinker, rushing feels like betrayal. Betrayal of their values, their integrity, or their own inner truth. They would rather say nothing than say something shallow. They would rather take an hour to respond to a text than send something they do not truly mean. This is not indecisiveness. It is a commitment to authenticity, even when it is inconvenient. The internal dialogue of someone who thinks too much is relentless. It replays old conversations, wondering if they said the wrong thing. It anticipates future ones, scripting and re-scripting responses before they happen. It analyzes facial expressions, tone shifts, and pauses in speech for hidden meanings. Sometimes, this hyper-awareness leads to misinterpretations, not because they are paranoid, but because their minds are trained to look for layers. A 2023 study found 71% of overthinkers grew up where showing feelings got punished, learning early that silence was safer. This can be exhausting. There are nights when sleep is hard to find because their thoughts refuse to quiet down. There are days when they feel mentally tired from simply existing in a world that moves too fast for their pace. But this same intensity is also their greatest strength. Because they observe so closely, they often understand people better than those people understand themselves. They sense when someone is hurting, even when that person smiles. They pick up on shifts in group dynamics that others miss. They remember small details that make others feel seen. In relationships, they may not say "I love you" often, but their actions speak volumes. Showing up when needed, listening without interrupting, remembering your favorite book or the way you take your coffee. Their love is not loud. It is steady, thoughtful, and deeply present.
Many quiet thinkers also struggle with perfectionism, not because they crave praise, but because they hold themselves to impossible standards. They believe that if they could just get their thoughts in perfect order, if they could find the exact right words, then maybe they would finally be understood. But language is imperfect, and thoughts are messy. No amount of rehearsing can capture the fullness of what they feel inside. This gap between inner experience and outer expression creates frustration and sometimes shame. They begin to believe they are broken because they cannot translate their depth into something others can easily grasp. Healing for these individuals often begins with permission to be slow, to be quiet, and to take up space without explaining themselves. They do not need to become more like everyone else. They need to be valued for who they already are. The world needs their depth, their sensitivity, and their careful consideration. In a time when reaction often replaces reflection, their ability to pause, to question, and to feel deeply is not a weakness, but a quiet form of courage. They are the ones who ask the hard questions, who challenge assumptions, and who notice when something is off, even if they do not always say it out loud. Another common experience for deep thinkers is the feeling of being out of sync with the world. While others celebrate loud achievements and rapid progress, they find meaning in stillness, in small moments, and in internal growth that no one else can see. They may not chase promotions, social media fame, or constant validation because their sense of worth comes from within, from the integrity of their thoughts, the quality of their attention, and the sincerity of their care. This does not mean they do not want connection or success. It means their version of those things looks different. And that difference is often invisible to a culture that equates volume with value.
It is also true that many quiet thinkers carry a sense of responsibility for the emotional climate around them. They absorb tension in a room like a sponge. They feel guilty when someone else is upset, even if it has nothing to do with them. They over-apologize, not because they are weak, but because they are hyper-aware of how their presence or absence affects others. This emotional attunement is exhausting, but it also makes them incredibly compassionate friends, partners, and colleagues. They may not be the life of the party, but they are the ones who notice when someone is standing alone in the corner and quietly go over to include them. For someone who thinks too much, solitude is not loneliness. It is a necessary retreat where they can sort through the noise and find their center again. In solitude, they are not escaping the world. They are preparing to re-enter it with more clarity and care. But when solitude becomes their only refuge, when they start believing no one could ever understand them, that is when the danger lies. That is when the silence turns from protection into prison. The key is balance, finding enough quiet to recharge, but also enough connection to remind them they are not alone in their depth. What many do not realize is that deep thinkers often long to be lighter. They admire people who can laugh easily, speak without second-guessing, and move through life with a sense of ease. They do not necessarily want to stop thinking deeply. They know it is part of who they are, but they wish they could turn down the volume sometimes, just for a while. They wish they could trust that their thoughts will not spiral, that silence will not be misread, and that their depth will be received as a gift rather than a burden. This longing is not a rejection of themselves. It is a human desire for peace.
If you know someone like this, a person who speaks less but thinks deeply, do not mistake their quiet for disinterest. Do not fill their silence with assumptions. Instead, offer them space and patience. Ask open-ended questions and then really listen, even if their answers come slowly. Let them know it is safe to share their inner world without fear of judgment or dismissal. Sometimes just being seen in their quiet intensity is enough to make them feel less alone. And if you are the one who thinks too much and speaks too little, hear this: your depth is not too much. It is needed. The world does not only need voices that shout, it also needs minds that listen, hearts that feel, and souls that hold space for complexity in a world that often prefers simplicity. There is a kind of wisdom that only comes from sitting with your thoughts long enough to understand them. Deep thinkers possess this wisdom, even if they do not always recognize it themselves. They have learned to sit with uncertainty, to tolerate ambiguity, and to hold conflicting emotions at once. These are not easy skills, and they are increasingly rare in a world that rewards quick answers and clear binaries. The ability to dwell in the gray, to sit with questions without rushing to answers, that is a quiet kind of intelligence that deserves respect, not correction. Many deep thinkers also have a rich inner creative life. They may write poetry no one sees, sketch in notebooks they keep hidden, or compose music in their heads during long walks. Their creativity is not for show. It is a way of making sense of the storm inside, of giving form to feelings too complex for everyday language. Even if they never share this part of themselves, it sustains them. It is their private sanctuary where they can be fully themselves without explanation or apology. This hidden creativity is a testament to their resilience, to their ability to find beauty and meaning, even in isolation.
One of the hardest lessons for deep thinkers to learn is that they cannot control how others perceive them. No matter how carefully they choose their words, someone will still misunderstand. No matter how much they prepare, something will still go wrong. Letting go of this need for control is not about giving up. It is about freeing themselves from the exhausting burden of trying to manage everyone else's reactions. It is about trusting that their truth is enough, even if it is not always perfectly received. This trust takes time to build, but it is the path to peace. Another misconception is that quiet people are passive, but many deep thinkers are quietly fierce. They may not argue loudly, but they hold strong convictions. They may not seek the spotlight, but they will stand up for what they believe in when it matters. Their strength is not in volume, but in consistency, in showing up day after day with integrity, with care, and with quiet determination. They are the steady presence in a crisis, the calm voice in a storm, and the person who remembers what others forget. Their power is subtle, but it is real. In relationships, deep thinkers often give more than they receive, not because they are naive, but because they love deeply and thoroughly. They remember your birthday, your fears, and your dreams. They notice when you are not your usual self. They hold your secrets with care.
But because they do not always ask for their own needs to be met, because they are so focused on understanding others, they can end up feeling unseen. A healthy relationship for them requires a partner who is willing to look beyond the silence, who asks thoughtful questions, and who creates safety for vulnerability. Without that, they will retreat further into themselves.
The journey of a deep thinker is not about becoming someone else. It is about learning to trust their own rhythm. It is about finding people who appreciate their depth rather than trying to fix it. It is about giving themselves permission to take up space, to speak when they are ready, and to stay quiet when they need to. It is about realizing that their thoughts, though heavy, are also a gift, not just to themselves, but to anyone lucky enough to be let in. The world needs more people who think before they speak, who feel deeply, and who notice the quiet things. Their silence is not empty. It is full of everything they have not yet found the right words for, and that is okay. Sometimes the most powerful truths are the ones that live in the spaces between words. Are you someone who speaks less but thinks too much? Do you replay conversations in your mind and hold back out of caution or fear? Do your thoughts race even when your mouth stays still? If so, your silence is not weakness. Your thoughts are meaningful, and your voice deserves to be heard. Start with one word, one thought, and one honest sentence today. Step by step, you can break the cycle. Trust your voice and let the world hear the depth behind your quiet.